You buy a cup of coffee, $3. A sandwich, $7. $10, gone before noon. It feels like nothing. A small number that slips through your fingers and leaves no mark. You don't even remember spending it by dinner. But what if I told you it never actually disappeared? It just changed hands. And what if I told you something else? Most of what people tell you about this small amount of money is only half the truth. The other half is the part that makes the difference between retiring comfortable and retiring anxious. Listen to both halves. Then decide for yourself. Every dollar you spend today has two prices. Most people only ever see one of them. The first price is on the receipt. Simple. Obvious. $3 for coffee. $7 for lunch. You hand it over, you forget it. The second price is invisible. It's what that same dollar could have become if it had walked a different road. Not a worse road, just a different one. This is not a lecture about quitting coffee. I want to say that clearly, because most videos like this one are secretly about guilt. This isn't. This is a calculation. And like every calculation, it has assumptions, it has risks, and it has corners that people usually hide because those corners make the video less exciting and less shareable. I will not hide any of them. Not one. Let's start with what's easy. $10 a day is $300 a month. It is roughly $3,600 a year. A number you could earn back in a single good paycheck. On its own, it barely registers. But money behaves differently when it stops sitting in your wallet. It behaves differently when it sits inside a machine that knows how to multiply itself, quietly, in the background, while you sleep. That machine is almost absurdly simple. You put money in. It grows. And most of that growth keeps growing on top of itself. Layers stacking on layer, year after year, without you doing anything else. This is what people mean when they say compound interest. But the phrase has been repeated so many times it's lost its weight. So let's give it weight again. The most common version of this machine, for an ordinary person without a finance degree or a stock-picking hobby, is a low-cost index fund. The kind that doesn't try to outsmart the market. It just tracks one, like the S&P 500, owning a small slice of hundreds of companies at once. Over 20 and 30-year stretches, the average return after inflation usually lands somewhere between 7 and 10% a year. That's the number you'll hear most often. It's also the number most people misunderstand. Because average is a deceptive word. It hides a harder truth underneath it. The road to that average is anything but smooth. It's not a gentle, predictable climb. It's a jagged, uneven, occasionally terrifying walk that only looks smooth once you zoom out far enough. Some years the market loses nearly half its value. Like 2008. Like early 2020, when an entire global economy seemed to pause overnight. Nobody, not even the best professionals with the best models, knows in advance which year will be the bad one. Not one person on earth can reliably call it. So why does anyone do this at all, if the road is that unpredictable? Because over long enough stretches, the bad years get absorbed by the good ones, and the trend that survives is upward. But knowing that fact and feeling calm while living through a bad year are two very different things. That is why the first stage of this journey is not just a math problem. It is a test of nerve. Most people fail it not because they did the math wrong, but because they couldn't sit still while the chart turned red. Before we get to the bigger numbers, let's talk about two people. Call them whatever you like. Their story matters more than their names. The first person started putting $10 a day into this machine at age 25. Nothing dramatic. Just a habit, repeated. The second person had the same income, the same long-term goal, the same intentions, but waited until 35 to start because they wanted to feel more financially stable first. A reasonable instinct. Almost everyone has had it. Both of them stopped contributing at age 60. The first person invested for 35 years. The second person invested for 25 years. 10 fewer years. On paper, that doesn't sound like a catastrophe. But here's the part that surprises almost everyone the first time they see it. By the end of the road, assuming the same average return, the first person's account is almost twice the size of the second person's. Not 1.5 times. Nearly double. Not because the first person contributed dramatically more money over their lifetime. The difference in total contributions is modest. The real difference is that those first 10 years, the ones the second person skipped, were 10 years the machine was allowed to run completely undisturbed. No one was telling it to wait. No one was telling it to start later. It simply worked, quietly, while its owner wasn't even thinking about it. That is the real price of hesitation. It is not measured in the dollars you didn't spend today. It is measured in the years the machine never got to run, years that can never be bought back later at any price, no matter how much extra you try to contribute afterward. Now let's actually look at the numbers. Assuming an average return of 7% a year, on the more conservative end of that earlier range, and remembering, always, that this is an average path, not the real path you will personally walk. Year 1. You have contributed $3,600. Your account holds about $3,700. Almost no visible difference at all. This is the most boring part of the entire journey. This is, statistically, where most people quit, right before anything interesting happens. Year 5. You have contributed $18,000. Your account holds about $22,000. For the first time, the gap between what you put in and what you actually have becomes visible, even if it's still modest. You start to notice it on the statement instead of having to calculate it yourself. Year 10. You have contributed $36,000. Your account holds about $53,000. Nearly $17,000 of that came from something you didn't personally work for. It came from time, simply being allowed to pass. Year 20. You have contributed $72,000. Your account holds about $158,000. Growth has now overtaken your own contributions. Your money is earning more in a single year than you are putting in during that same year. This is the moment the machine, in a real sense, starts carrying you instead of the other way around. Year 30. You have contributed $108,000 across 3 decades of small, repeated decisions. Your account holds about $367,000. $259,000 of that did not come from your wallet at any point. It came from time, and from the simple discipline of never pulling your hand away when things felt uncertain. But remember this, because skipping it would be dishonest. If you happen to start investing right before a crash, your first few years of statements could show negative numbers. Not because the strategy is flawed, not because index funds don't work, simply because timing isn't fair and the calendar doesn't care about your personal starting line. This effect even has a name among economists: sequence of returns risk. The order in which good and bad years arrive can matter almost as much as the average itself, especially early on. And don't forget another quiet predator hiding inside the fine print: fund management fees. A good, low-cost index fund usually charges under 0.1% a year. A poorly run, actively managed fund can charge 1% or more, sometimes much more. That difference sounds small enough to ignore. But over 30 years, a 1% gap can quietly take tens of thousands of dollars away from that $367,000 outcome. No warning arrives in the mail. No alert appears on your phone. It simply isn't there anymore, slowly siphoned away in numbers too small to notice month to month. Here is the part almost nobody tells you, because it doesn't make for an exciting thumbnail. The hardest stretch of this entire journey isn't year 30, when the numbers are dramatic and satisfying. It's year 1 through year 5, when nothing visible seems to be happening at all. This is the shadow of the inflection point. The long, flat, unglamorous stretch that has to exist before the curve finally starts bending upward in any way you can actually see. The math is working the entire time, every single day, without pause. But it doesn't feel like it's working. Your statement looks almost identical, month after month, to the amount you simply put in yourself. There's no visible reward to point at, nothing flashy to screenshot and share. This is exactly where most people stop. Not because the math turned out to be wrong, not because the strategy failed, but because ordinary human patience runs out before the curve has any real chance to show up and prove itself. So how do you actually survive that flat, uneventful stretch, the one with no applause and no proof? 3 things tend to help, and none of them require unusual willpower. 1. Stop checking your balance every single day. Short-term movement, up or down, is noise. It is not a signal worth reacting to, and reacting to noise is how good long-term plans get abandoned at exactly the wrong moment. 2. Automate your contribution completely, so you no longer have to make a fresh decision every single month. Decisions,